In April 1841, Silas Rutledge made a statement that shocked even the most heartless plantation owners in South Carolina. He was giving an enslaved man named Ezekiel Cross complete control over his daughter Catherine, who was 28 years old and weighed more than 260 pounds. Not as a nurse or a friend, but as her owner in every way that mattered, except on paper. The white society of Colleton County was shocked, but they had no idea what Rutledge was really doing or what Ezekiel Cross would do to Catherine in the months that followed. By November, Catherine's body had changed in ways that no one could explain. There were 13 dead men, and Cypress Grove Plantation was just a pile of ash. What really went on between the plantation owner's daughter and the man who was a slave? What did he do to her that scared everyone who saw it? Before we tell you the scary truth, please subscribe, hit the bell, and leave a comment with your state below. Now, let me take you back to the beginning. It was very hot and humid in Colleton County in the spring, which made the air feel heavy. The Combahee River moved slowly through the low country. Its dark water showed Spanish moss hanging from live oak trees like funeral shrouds. There were rice paddies for miles. Hundreds of enslaved people worked in their flooded fields, wading through water up to their knees from dawn to dusk. This was wealth built on pain and prosperity taken from the suffering of others. Men who thought that cruelty was just the way things were made it all okay. Cypress Grove Plantation was on 800 acres of land that was only moderately productive. Silas Rutledge, the owner, wasn't quite one of the county's elite, but he really wanted to be. He owned 58 slaves, which made him rich by most standards, but not very important in the local community. The most powerful families owned thousands of acres of land and hundreds of slaves. They spent the summer in Charleston and sent their kids to school in the north. Their names had power that could open doors or ruin reputations with just one word. Silas married Elizabeth Yancey in 1812. This marriage gave him a respectable last name and some land. Elizabeth was a sensible woman who kept careful records and seemed more interested in making money than moving up the social ladder. She died in 1813 while giving birth to a daughter named Catherine. For 28 years, Silas took care of Catherine on his own, while also trying to get into the inner circles of county power. He was tall and thin, like people who forget to eat when they are obsessed. His hair had turned gray too soon, which made him look very serious, just like his cold personality. People in business knew him as a smart but honest man, who would make tough deals but keep his word. Catherine, his daughter, had grown up alone, with tutors teaching her, and never really feeling like she belonged anywhere. She was 28 years old and weighed almost 260 pounds by 1841. Doctors who thought she had hysteria and female nervous disorders gave her medications for years, which made her body swell. She had violent fits in which she would scream and throw things. She had used a letter opener to hurt her father the year before, leaving a scar on his left hand. The white society of Colleton County talked about her behind her back with fake sympathy. Poor Silas Rutledge, burdened with a mad daughter. What a shame. She had been such a pretty child. They didn't know the truth. None of them knew what Catherine had seen when she was 12 years old, or that her insanity was not insanity at all, but a normal reaction to living with monsters. A private courier brought the letter on April 7th. Silas opened it in his office, thinking it was a business letter. Instead, he found 3 pages on expensive paper, sealed with red wax, that had a symbol he recognized right away, a scythe crossed with wheat stalks, which was the mark of the Brethren of the Harvest. The Brethren were 13 men who met in secret to do rituals they thought would make the land stronger by sacrificing blood. They took ideas from enslaved people who knew about spirits and power, and combined them with old European customs. They thought that the strong should literally eat the weak when they had to. In 1822, Silas became a member. He had been to about 40 gatherings over the course of 19 years, taking part in rituals that were anywhere from disturbing to horrible. The letter told him he owed $12,000, which he had borrowed over years of losing money at gambling and bad investments. This was an impossible amount. To pay back the debt, he would have to sell most of his land and all of his slaves, which would mean destroying everything he had worked for. But the letter gave members in tough spots another option, a show of commitment. Silas would give one of his enslaved men full control over his daughter Catherine, not for a short time or as punishment, but for a full year of real responsibility. The enslaved man would have complete control over her body, her daily life, and how she was treated. Silas would tell everyone at a meeting of the county's most important families that this was an extreme medical measure for his daughter's condition. The shame would be total. In a society where white women were thought to be more valuable and protected than anyone else, Silas would be saying that his daughter was worth less than his property. But if he agreed, the brethren would pay off his debt and help him get back on his feet. That night, Silas spent hours in his study. He thought about what he could do. He would be completely ruined if he went bankrupt. The brethren knew all the judges, lawyers, and politicians in the area. If he caused trouble, they could make him go away. He could also give up his daughter's dignity to keep his own job, which is what society had taught him to do. Put property over people and power over morals. He wrote his acceptance letter by candlelight and sent it before dawn. 3 days later, another letter came with a name and a short history. Ezekiel Cross, who was 33 years old, recently bought through a middleman from a plantation in Virginia. They knew how to do carpentry and herbal medicine. Temperament, calm, and obedient. The letter didn't say that Ezekiel Cross was chosen specifically for this job, that it was no accident that he was put at Cypress Grove, that he had his own burning need for justice and the ability to wait for the right moment. A slave trader named Henderson drove Ezekiel to the site in a wagon on April 13. The wagon went straight to the main house, which was strange because most slave sales took place near the barns. Silas stepped out onto the porch and shielded his eyes from the morning sun. Ezekiel was sitting in the wagon bed. Silas's eyes were the first thing he noticed. Most slaves kept their heads down to stay alive, but Ezekiel looked straight at Silas with a calm, thoughtful look on his face. It made Silas very uncomfortable. Ezekiel was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with broad shoulders and lean muscle from a lifetime of hard work. There were no scars on his skin from being whipped. His clothes were plain but neat. His hands were big and calloused, but his fingers moved with such precision that it looked like he was doing skilled work instead of just using brute force. Henderson climbed down and gave Silas some papers. Here is Ezekiel Cross, as you asked. The last owner said he was quiet but smart. Your associates want you to know that this one was carefully chosen. Silas barely looked at the papers. He spoke directly to Ezekiel. Do you know why you're here? Yes, sir. Ezekiel's voice was deep and steady, with a hint of a Virginia accent. My daughter is sick. You will have to take care of her. The doctors have failed. You say you know how to treat her with herbs. My grandmother was a healer, sir. She taught me before I was sold. The deal went through quickly. Ezekiel was taken to a small cabin near the main house that was not part of the other slave quarters. He got some basic supplies and was told that his duties would start the next day. He was told that his only job was to take care of Catherine and that if he didn't do it, there would be serious consequences. When asked, Ezekiel nodded and said, "Yes, sir." After that, he was on his own. For the first time since he got there, he let his face change. His shoulders and jaw relaxed a little. He sat on the bed and took a small cloth bundle out of his shirt. He carefully opened it and saw a piece of old paper with 3 names written in a child's shaky handwriting: Sarah, Benjamin, and Ruth. These were his wife, son, and daughter, who had been sold to a plantation in Alabama 3 years ago that was known for working slaves to death. He found out that all of them had died within 18 months. Sarah died from a fever that didn't get better. Benjamin died from an injury that got infected. And Ruth died from just giving up. A 6-year-old girl stopped eating because she couldn't understand why her family had been torn apart. And it was Silas Rutledge who had sold them. Not because he needed money or because they had done something wrong, but because he had been showing the brethren that he could make tough choices without being sentimental. He had torn a family apart like kindling for a fire. Ezekiel had spent 2 years working his way south, getting sold from plantation to plantation on purpose and always gathering information. He learned about the brethren through whispers. He found out about their members and rituals. He found out that they thought they were above any consequences. Ezekiel knew that this was his chance when he was offered to be sold to Rutledge. He would be able to get into Rutledge's house, learn his secrets, and find out what made him weak. And sometimes, justice didn't come from courts or laws. It came from being patient, making plans, and being ready to be as horrible as you needed to be. He folded the paper with the 3 names on it and put it away. He then lay back, looked at the ceiling, and started to think about what to do next. April 14th was the first day of his life. A middle-aged house slave named Judith with gray hair took him to Catherine's room on the 2nd floor. She knocked, but not very hard. "Miss Catherine, your father has brought someone to help with your treatments." There was a loud crash from inside, as if something heavy had hit the wall. Then Catherine's voice, slurred but full of hate. "I don't want any more treatments. Send him away," Judith said, looking at Ezekiel with pity. "She has bad days. This is one." Ezekiel opened the door and stepped inside, shutting it before Judith could follow. The curtains were heavy and dark, so the room was big. The air was stale and smelled like dirty bedding and something else, the sweet smell of mercury rotting. There were clothes all over the place, books on the floor, and a broken picture on the wall. Catherine sat in a chair by the cold fireplace, wearing a dressing gown that was stained. Her dark hair was loose and knotted. Her eyes were blurry and her face was puffy. Her hands shook all the time on the arms of the chair. She looked at Ezekiel with confusion, then fear, and finally anger. "Who are you? I said, no more doctors." "I'm not a doctor, miss. My name is Ezekiel. Your father asked me to help you." "Help?" She laughed harshly. "That's what they all say. Help, treatment, medicine. They mean poison. They mean chains. They mean silence." She stood up suddenly and swayed. "I know what this is. He is punishing me again for remembering, for speaking, and for not forgetting." Ezekiel stood still and did not move. "What are you supposed to forget?" The question took her by surprise. Her anger turned into something more fragile. "You don't know?" "I don't know anything, miss." "Only that your father says you are sick." Catherine looked at him closely, as if she were seeing him for the first time. "You don't live here." "Virginia originally, miss." "Do you know what goes on in this house?" "What they do in the basement?" Ezekiel's heart raced, but he kept his face calm. "I don't know what you mean." "Liar. There was no heat in it, just tiredness." "Everyone lies. It's easier than telling the truth." She sat down heavily. "Leave me alone. Tell my dad that his latest torture didn't work." But Ezekiel went to the window and pulled back the curtains. The sun came in. Catherine screamed and put her hands over her eyes. "When was the last time you went outside, miss?" "I can't walk that far. I'm too weak." "When was the last time you ate without laudanum? The medicine is necessary. Doctors say so. What if the doctors are wrong?" She took her hands away from her eyes. She looked at him with a mix of hope and fear. Ezekiel turned away from the window and said, "What did you say?" This was the time the first card was played. I asked, "What if the doctors are wrong? What if everything you've been told about your condition is meant to keep you under control and not help you? What if your father has been poisoning you for years to make sure you never get well enough to talk about what you saw?" "Nothing at all." Catherine's eyes got big, and her shaking hand stopped. She sat there for 30 seconds, thinking. Her voice changed and became clearer when she spoke. "Your father told me nothing, miss. But I have eyes. I know mercury poisoning. I know long-term laudanum use. Healthy women do not become like this without someone working hard to make them that way." "Why would you say this?" Suspicion crept back. "This is a trick. You are testing me. I am telling you I can help you become truly well, clear-minded, strong enough to walk out of this room. But it will not be easy. Your body has been dependent on those medicines for years. Stopping will be painful. You will feel worse before better, and your father will not approve." "Then why would you do it?" Ezekiel met her eyes. "Because I want Silas Rutledge to suffer for my own reasons. The best way to do that is to give him back a daughter who is sane enough to remember everything and strong enough to talk about it. The truth. It's dangerous to say things so clearly, but Catherine wasn't stupid. She was hurt. She would see through manipulation, but she might believe in a real common cause. Do you want revenge on my father? Yes, miss. What did he do to you? He sold my family, my wife, and 2 children. He sent them to their deaths for no other reason than to show people who judge worth by cruelty that he was right. Catherine took this in and then nodded slowly. The brethren. He sold them for the brethren. Not a question. The brethren, miss. You don't know? She laughed, but it was a little crazy. You will learn. Everyone learns eventually. She leaned in. What happens next if I agree and let you help me? You get better, miss. Then we decide what to do next. We. I have my revenge to plan. You have yours. Maybe they are the same. Catherine looked at him closely. At last, she said something. I want them all dead. My father, Judge Pelham, Reverend Crenshaw, all of them. Every man who stood in that cellar. I want them to suffer first, to know it is coming, to beg. Then I want them dead. The venom was shocking, not because it was so strong, but because it came from someone who was thought to be crazy and harmless. This wasn't crazy. This was rage that had built up over years of being held back. Ezekiel nodded. Then we have an understanding. Miss Catherine, if we are conspirators, use my name. I cannot, miss. Not where anyone might hear. We must be careful. Then know something, Ezekiel. Catherine's eyes glittered dangerously. I've killed before. Properant. Anistan. That is Bod. Anistan. I've killed before. 3 house slaves who might have told my father about my lucid moments. I can't remember exactly how. The laudanum makes everything blurry, but I know I did it. They disappeared, and their families were told they ran away. She smiled in a horrible way. So if you plan to betray me, use me, and then get rid of me, know that I am not a victim. I am something worse. Ezekiel felt ice run down his back. He had thought he would have an ally, not someone who might be more violent than him, but he stayed calm. I trust you, miss, and I won't betray you. Good. Catherine stood up straighter. Then let's get started. But I have one condition. I want to die when this is over, and we've gotten our revenge. I don't want to live with what I've seen and done. You will help me with that too. Agreed. Ezekiel had not expected that, but he was now committed. Agreed. Then we have a deal, Catherine said as she reached out her hand. Ezekiel shook it after thinking about it. She had a stronger grip than I thought. Ezekiel started treating Catherine the next week. He slowly cut back on her laudanum and gave her herbal tinctures instead. For anxiety and sleep, he gave her valerian root. For digestive problems, he gave her chamomile. And for her liver to help it get rid of toxins, he gave her milk thistle. It was a very hard process. Catherine was sick for 3 days, shaking, throwing up, and having a fever. Ezekiel stayed with her the whole time, holding a basin while she was sick, wiping her face with cool cloths, and talking softly to her to let her know she wasn't alone. After the worst was over, she was weak but clearer than she had been in years. The constant shaking got better. Her speech was clearer. She was able to concentrate on reading. After that, the real work started. At first, Ezekiel had her walk short distances, like from her room to the end of the hallway and back. It wore her out, but he kept saying, every day, a little further. He changed her diet by giving her lean meats and vegetables instead of heavy pastries. He strictly limited her portions, even though she fought him because she had used food as comfort for years, which made it hard for her to stop. They talked while she worked on getting better. Catherine told him about the cellar and what she saw at 12. She went into great detail about it, which made Ezekiel's stomach turn, but he didn't say anything. She told him about years of gaslighting that followed, when her father convinced everyone, even her, that she was crazy, that she made up memories, and that nothing she said could be trusted. She told him about the journal she kept hidden, which had pages with dates and times when her father left late at night, names of visitors at odd hours, and sounds from below that shouldn't have been happening. Ezekiel talked to her about his family, about Sarah, who taught their kids to read while they were working and sang while they did it, about Benjamin, who could do math that shocked his teachers when he was 8, about Ruth, who loved flowers and picked wild ones to decorate their cabin. He told her that Silas came to the Virginia plantation with a buyer's warrant, how he looked at them like animals. He agreed to buy all 3 for a fair price, but then changed his mind at the last minute and said he only needed the woman and children, not Ezekiel. How he split the family on purpose for no good reason, just because he could. He smiled when he did it. Ezekiel said in a low voice, "That's what I remember most. My son crying, holding my leg, begging, and my wife trying to be strong and telling Benjamin to be brave." Your father smiled like he liked causing that pain. Catherine's eyes were clearer now as she listened. "I'm sorry. I know sorry is just a word, but I'm sorry you had to go through what my father did. You are not responsible for what he does, miss." "No, but I am responsible for what I do next. And I promise you, Ezekiel, he will pay for what he took from you. They will all pay." The official announcement was set for April 29. 41 people came to the Cypress Grove dining room for what the invitation said was an important family announcement. The county's elite came by carriage: Judge Pelham and his wife Eleanor, Reverend Crenshaw and his daughter Marcus Fanning and his family, and Benjamin Lyle from the bank. The meal was fancy, with oysters, roasted duck, several rice dishes, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, and a huge cake for dessert. Catherine sat at her father's right hand the whole time, eating little, only speaking when spoken to, and not offering anything. Ezekiel worked with other house slaves, moving quietly, filling glasses, and clearing plates. Most guests couldn't see him, but he heard everything, saw everything, and stored it all away. Silas stood up and tapped his glass after dessert. "Thank you for coming, my friends. As you know, Catherine has been sick for a long time. We tried every treatment we could think of, from doctors in Charleston to a specialist in Philadelphia. Nothing worked, until recently." He pointed to Ezekiel. 2 weeks ago, I brought in Ezekiel, who knows a lot about herbal medicine. As you can see, Catherine is much better. She's clearer, calmer, and more like herself than she has been in years. People at the table politely murmured. Catherine's face stayed neutral, but Ezekiel could see that she was gripping her napkin under the table. "This improvement," Silas went on, "has made things hard for me. Catherine needs more care than our family can give her. After a lot of thought, I have decided that Ezekiel will be in charge of my daughter's care. He will have full control over her treatment, daily activities, and living arrangements, starting right away." The whispers changed their tone. Now there is confusion. A few guests looked at each other. Mrs. Pelham's face showed that she was shocked. Marcus Fanning said something. "Silas, I don't understand. Are you putting your daughter in the care of a slave for the rest of her life?" "I'm putting her with someone who has succeeded where others have failed. My daughter's health is more important than what people think. But surely," Reverend Crenshaw said carefully, "there are other options. A companion, a nurse, someone more appropriate." Silas's face hardened. "I've made up my mind." "Catherine agrees. Don't you, daughter?" Everyone looked at Catherine. This was the time when she could say no, tell the truth, and bring everything down. Instead, she smiled. A small, controlled smile that didn't give anything away. "I trust my father's judgment. Ezekiel has been nice, and his treatments help. I'm happy with this arrangement. It was delivered perfectly." But Ezekiel saw what others did not. He saw that her knuckles were white on that napkin, and that her eyes were flashing with rage. She was doing what she was supposed to do, being a good daughter. But she was screaming on the inside. The night was full of awkward talk. Some guests left before the party was over. Others stayed behind to talk to Silas in private and ask questions they didn't want to be public. Ezekiel heard bits and pieces. "Are you sure this is a good idea? What will people say? The brethren won't like this going public." The last one was from Judge Pelham, who said it quietly near the study. It was too quiet for Pelham to hear what Silas said, but he nodded and clapped Pelham's shoulder. Everyone had left by midnight. Catherine went to bed. He went to his study. Ezekiel helped clean up, and then went upstairs. He tapped lightly on Catherine's door. "Come in." She was still wearing her dinner dress and sitting by the window, looking out at the dark grounds. She didn't look. "How are you feeling, miss?" "I want to burn this house down with everyone in it. But we must be patient. Is that not what you tell me?" "Yes, miss. I agreed because I want them to feel secure. I want them to think this is just my father's eccentricity. I want them to forget about me while we work." She turned to look at him. "Did you see their faces? They were disgusted and felt sorry for me. They think I'm pathetic. They have no idea what we're planning." "And what exactly are we planning, Miss Catherine?" She went to her dresser and took out a wooden box. There were papers inside that were written by her. "I've been writing down everything I remember for years. Dates, names, descriptions of rituals, all coded so that it looks like nonsense if found. But I can decode it. We have enough to kill 20 men. And will anyone believe us, miss? A woman who just got better from being crazy and a man who is a slave? No. That's why we need proof. They can't ignore real physical evidence." She pulled out one specific page. "I know where they keep their records. The Brethren keeps a ledger of all activities, every ritual, every sacrifice, and every member's participation. It makes sure that everyone is equally guilty. My father told me about it years ago, before he knew I would remember." "Where is this ledger?" "In the cellar. There is a hidden room beyond the main chamber. I never saw inside, but I heard them talk about it. That is where they keep everything they can't afford to lose." Ezekiel was both excited and scared. It would be terrible evidence to have such a ledger, but getting it would mean going deep into the Brethren's territory. "We would need to get to it when the house is quiet. My dad goes to Charleston once a month for work. His next trip is on May 14th, and he will be gone for 3 days. That gives us 2 weeks to get ready. We need to know the layout of the cellar, every room, and every hiding place. I can help. I've been thinking about this for 16 years, and I know exactly what needs to happen." They whispered to each other for an hour about the details. Catherine drew a picture of the cellar layout from memory. Ezekiel wanted to know about keys, guards, and the schedules of the slaves. It was almost 2:00 the morning when he left her room. He hurried to his small room, his mind racing. He was now fully committed to working with a woman who was smart, hurt, and scary. He took out the paper with his family's names on it and looked at it by candlelight. "I'm doing this for you, for Sarah, for Benjamin, for Ruth, for everyone who has suffered because men like Silas Rutledge think that power gives them the right to ruin lives." He blew out the candle and lay in the dark, listening to the house settle. There were secrets in a cellar he had never seen that could tear apart South Carolina's most powerful families. He would go down there in 2 weeks to look for them. The 2 weeks went by in a false calm. Catherine kept getting better. She lost weight. Her mind stayed sharp. Every day, she walked more. More importantly, she was translating parts of her coded journals for Ezekiel, adding details about the Brethren that made his blood run cold. The Brethren wasn't just in Colleton County. It was part of a bigger network in the South that linked societies in Charleston, Savannah, New Orleans, and Richmond. They all had different names, but the same structure. Rich men who thought their power came from old ways of being in charge and giving up things. They think they're carrying on traditions that have been around for thousands of years, Catherine said one afternoon. It was May 14th. The 14th of May came. Silas left for Charleston early in the morning with his carriage and servant. He would stay with friends, take care of business, and be back on the evening of May 16th. That gave them close to 3 full days. They didn't move until it got dark. The house got into its evening routine. The main house was quiet by 10. They met in Catherine's room. She had put on simple dark clothes that let her move around easily and pulled her hair back tightly. She looked like she was getting ready to fight. "Are you sure, miss?" "I've never been more sure. Let's go." The kitchen had a door to the cellar behind the pantry. The door looked like wall paneling, but when you pushed it, it clicked open and revealed a narrow staircase that led down into the dark. The smell hit right away. Wet dirt, old smoke, and something that smelled like it had gone bad. Catherine saw how he reacted. "You get used to it." "I wish I could say you stopped smelling it, but I would be lying." They carefully went down the stairs, with Ezekiel carrying a shuttered lantern that gave off very little light. The stairs were steep and made of old wood that creaked. They got to the bottom after 20 steps. The cellar was bigger than I thought it would be. It was at least 30 feet square and had low ceilings held up by thick beams. The floor was made of packed earth, and the walls were lined with stones that were leaking water. Catherine called the thing in the middle the altar, but it looked like a heavy wooden table now. But the dark stains on its surface and the grooves carved into its edges told a different story. There were candle holders, clay jars sealed with wax, wooden boxes, and a rack with black robes with red trim all over the room. There are shelves along one wall that hold books and papers. Catherine moved with confidence, like someone who had memorized a map. She took Ezekiel to the far wall, where the stones looked solid. But when she pressed on one stone, it clicked. A part swung open, showing another room. This room was smaller, only 10 feet by 10 feet, and the brethren kept its secrets here. The ledger was huge, 2 feet tall and 18 inches wide, and it was bound in dark leather with metal clasps. It sat on a wooden stand in the middle. There were smaller journals next to it. There were shelves around the walls, with jars that Ezekiel didn't want to look at too closely. Catherine whispered and pointed. "That is what we need." Ezekiel went to the stand and carefully opened the book. The pages were thick parchment with careful writing on them, including names and dates going back to 1800. Ritual descriptions written in a clinical way, like scientific experiments instead of horrible acts. He started reading, and with each entry, his fear grew. These men had not only been violent from time to time, they made it a habit. They met every 6 weeks, followed rituals based on the seasons, and thought blood fed the land. They had probably killed more than 37 people over the years, mostly enslaved people, but also poor whites, Native Americans, and anyone else who was weak. And notes about what people eat. They had not only killed, but also eaten. They ate pieces of victims that had been prepared in certain ways during ritual meals that they thought gave them power. Ezekiel said, "Dear God, this is worse than I thought. I tried to tell you," Catherine said in a flat voice. "I watched them when I was 12. I saw them cut pieces off that woman on the altar. I saw my father raise a goblet and drink. Then I spent 16 years being told I was crazy and that I made it all up. But I always knew." Ezekiel flipped through the pages looking for entries about his family. In October 1838, he found them. 3 lines. Bought a family unit from Virginia. Woman Sarah. Children Benjamin and Ruth. Separated from the man to show strength. Sent to Alabama contact. Payment received. That was all that was fair for his family to go through. "We have to take this," Ezekiel said, his voice full of anger. "No," Catherine said, putting her hand on his arm. "We need to copy the most important entries first. If we take it now, they will know right away." She was right. Ezekiel, on the other hand, wanted to burn everything. But getting back at someone took time and intelligence. They worked for 3 hours. Catherine had brought ink and paper. She copied down entries about certain rituals, focusing on those that listed current members. Ezekiel wrote down the names and dates of the victims, making a list that could be compared to other records. Tiring work, and the content made it worse. Ezekiel had to stop a few times because his hands were shaking too much. Catherine left the room completely, overwhelmed by memories. But they slowly and carefully built their case. A lot of evidence on each page. They were so focused that they didn't hear anyone coming down the stairs. The first sign that something was wrong was when the light in the outer chamber flared up. It was lantern light, which was much brighter than their single lamp. Ezekiel looked up quickly, and his blood ran cold. 2 other men stood next to Silas Rutledge in the doorway. At least 4 more people were in the main cellar behind them. "I have to say, I'm impressed," Silas said calmly. "I didn't think you would find the inner chamber." Catherine stood up slowly and stood between her father and Ezekiel. "You were supposed to be in Charleston." "I was supposed to be, but I never trusted your miraculous recovery. So I made arrangements. I left this morning, yes, but I returned this afternoon and watched the house all evening, waiting to see what you would do. He stepped into the room, and the two men blocked the door. Did you really think I wouldn't see this coming? That I wouldn't get ready for the chance that you might remember and want to get back at me? You've been poisoning me for 16 years, Catherine said, her voice steady despite everything. And you expect me to just accept that? I expect you to understand that it was necessary. You saw something you shouldn't have, a child. You couldn't understand. I couldn't let you ruin everything. I was 12, and I watched you kill a woman and eat her flesh. That wasn't fear, Father. That was a reasonable response to seeing evil. Evil, such a simple word. Silas moved further into the room, his eyes moving between Catherine and Ezekiel. And you, using my daughter to get to me, and filling her head with thoughts of revenge. Ezekiel didn't say anything. He was figuring out the odds and distances. 7 men against 1, and Catherine was too weak to fight. The situation seemed hopeless. It looked like Silas could read his mind. Don't do anything stupid. I don't want to hurt either of you. Not permanently, but I can't let this rebellion go on. He pointed to the men behind him. Bring them upstairs. We need to talk about what happens next. They were taken to Silas's study and locked in there together. There were no windows in the room, except for a high transom that was impossible to reach. The door was made of heavy oak and could only be opened from the outside. Catherine went to Ezekiel as soon as they were alone. Are you hurt? No, miss, but we are in serious trouble. Yes, but not as much as you think. She took something out of her dress, the papers they had been copying. I was able to keep these. He didn't search me. He was too sure. That won't help if we're dead. We're not going to die. Not tonight. Catherine's eyes were calculating. My father will want to work this out without killing me if he can. I am still his daughter and his blood, which gives us an advantage. They heard people coming in, voices in the hall, and men gathering over the next hour. The brethren was getting ready. At last, the door opened. Marcus Fanning stood there with a serious look on his face. They are ready for you. Come peacefully, and you will not be harmed. They were taken back down to the cellar. The main room had changed this time. There were 13 brethren members there, all in ritual robes. There were candles in every holder. The altar was covered in red cloth. There were 13 chairs in a perfect circle, and everyone was sitting in one except Silas's at the head of the altar. Ezekiel and Catherine were in the middle of the circle, facing Silas. The other people there looked on with faces that showed interest or anger. Silas took off his hood. Brothers of the harvest, thank you for coming on such short notice. We are in trouble. My daughter and her friend found our inner chamber. They were copying entries from the ledger when I stopped them, Judge Pelham said. Then they must be silenced forever. This isn't hard. I don't agree, Silas said, holding up a hand. She is my blood. I can't just throw her away without trying everything else first. The man is an opportunity. What opportunity? Reverend Crenshaw asked. To see if something I have long believed is true, that a person's actions can draw them into our work if they are framed in the right way. Silas looked at Ezekiel. You want revenge on me. You want to destroy me for what I did to your family. I understand that, but what if I offered you a different kind of revenge, a more meaningful one? I do not understand, Ezekiel said carefully. I am offering you membership, but not as an equal. The Brethren does not accept men of color as full members, but as an associate. You would attend our gatherings, participate in rituals, and in exchange, I would give you what you want most. My family is dead. You cannot give me what I want. No, but I can give you revenge against the people who killed them, the plantation owner in Alabama who worked your wife and children to death. His name is Edward Gaines. He is not part of the Brethren. He has no protection from us. If you join us, prove your loyalty, I will give you resources to destroy him. Money, information, whatever you need to make him suffer as you have suffered. The offer hung in the air, disgusting in how it was thought out. Join the men who killed his family, To get back at another monster. And what if I say no? Then you and Catherine both die tonight. Your bodies go into the swamp. No one will ever know what happened. The papers Catherine was copying will be burned. Her journals will be destroyed. Everything will go on as it always has. Silas spread his hands. But if you agree, you live. Catherine lives. You get your revenge. It only costs your soul. Ezekiel stared at Catherine. She shook her head very slightly, even though her face was pale. Don't do it. No matter what, don't become them. But Ezekiel was thinking about joining them, getting inside their group, gathering more proof, and buying time. He turned around and looked at Silas. And Catherine? What happens to her? She goes back to her room, takes her meds, and forgets what she saw. The other option is that she dies with you. No! Catherine's voice rang out across the room. I won't forget again. You can't make me shut up. Kill me if you have to, Father, but I won't pretend I don't know what you are. Silas's face hardened. Then you've made your choice. Wait, Ezekiel said quickly. I agree, but only if Catherine is free, not back to her room. Free. Let her leave this house, leave South Carolina, give her money to start over. If you do that, I will join you. A few members of the brethren shook their heads, but Judge Pelham did talk. The boy makes a good point. The girl is already broken. Who would believe her if she spoke? But a man who is willing to join us and be complicit, that is valuable. That shows that our power reaches even those who hate us. Silas thought about it. At last, he nodded. Okay, Catherine will be sent north. I have friends in Philadelphia who will take her in. She will get a new name and a monthly payment to live on, but she can never go back to South Carolina. She can never talk to anyone from her old life again. She will be dead to everyone here. Agreed? Catherine stared at Ezekiel. No, I won't leave you. Agreed. Ezekiel cut in. She goes free, and I join you. Then we have a deal, Silas said to the others. Catherine is leaving tomorrow. Ezekiel's initiation will be in 3 weeks, at the next regular gathering. Until then, he stays at Cypress Grove under watch. If he tries to escape or contact anyone, the deal is void, and both die. Understood? Ezekiel nodded. Catherine looked like she wanted to fight, but Ezekiel caught her eye and shook his head. Believe me. The next morning, Catherine left. At dawn, a closed carriage took her away. Ezekiel saw it roll down the long drive from his cabin window and into the trees. She wasn't allowed to say goodbye. After the fight in the cellar, he wasn't allowed to talk to her. But when she was taken to her room the night before, she had looked back at him once, and he had seen something in her eyes that gave him hope. She got it. She knew he hadn't really given up. She understood that this was a plan, not a loss. The question was whether she would really go to Philadelphia or if she had other plans. Ezekiel's life was the longest in the 3 weeks that followed. They kept an eye on him all the time. 2 people in charge followed him around all the time. He couldn't leave the plantation. He was given small jobs to do to keep him busy, tasks that didn't mean anything and only took up time. But he could also go into the main house, the study where Silas kept his papers, and the cellar where the next meeting would be held. They were keeping an eye on him, but they were also testing him to see if he would try to run away or sabotage something. Ezekiel did not do either. He acted like a man who had lost and made a smart choice to stay alive. He didn't talk back, didn't ask questions, and didn't cause any trouble. He was, however, watching everything, learning the house's routines, noting which slaves could be trusted, which overseers were cruel, and which brethren members came by often. He was making a mental map of how everything worked and looking for flaws. And at night, when he was alone in his cabin, he thought about what was to come. To become a member, he would have to take part in their rituals. They would put him to the test. They would want to get him involved in something terrible so that he could never tell anyone about it without hurting himself. He thought about how far he would go, what lines he would not cross even for revenge, and whether there was any crime so bad that justice did not make it right. He didn't have good answers to those questions. Silas came to his cabin on June 2nd, the night before his initiation. It was late, after 12. Ezekiel woke up to someone knocking on the door. When he opened it, he saw that his owner was the only one there. "Can I come in?" Ezekiel moved out of the way. Silas walked in and looked around the empty room. At last, he said something. "Tomorrow, you will become one of us. Not fully, never fully, but enough. I want you to understand what that means. I understand what I agreed to. Do you? Do you? Truly?" Silas sat on the single chair, uninvited. The Brethren has existed for 43 years. In that time, we have never lost a member to exposure. Never had someone break our code of silence. Do you know why? Because everyone is equally guilty? Partly. But also because we take care of each other. A man joins the Brethren, and suddenly doors open. Business opportunities appear. Legal problems disappear. Enemies find themselves in difficulty. We are not just a society, Ezekiel. We are a network of power that extends across the entire South. Once you are part of that network, even as an associate, you will have access to resources you cannot imagine. And in exchange, I help you murder people. Silas did not flinch. In return, you help us keep the natural order, the strong over the weak, the powerful over the powerless. That's how the world has always worked. We just accept it and use it to our advantage. You killed my family to show your commitment to that order. I did, and I would do it again, because sentiment is weakness. Love is weakness. The moment you care more about people than about power, you have already lost. Silas bent over. But here's what I want you to know. Your family is dead. Nothing you do will change that. But you can make sure their deaths meant something. You can use the power the Brethren gives you to stop other families from going through the same thing. You can work from inside our organization to make changes, to push for better conditions and less harsh treatment of slaves. You will have a voice at our table that is worth something. It was almost convincing. Almost. The thought that Ezekiel could use his position to help others and become some kind of reformer from the inside. But he knew it was a trap, an excuse. He would be in trouble the moment he took part in their rituals. He would be corrupted the moment he accepted their power. "Why are you telling me this?" Ezekiel asked. "Because I want you to succeed. Because having you as an ally is better than having you as an enemy. Because I killed your family, but I don't want to kill you." Silas stood up. "Tomorrow night, you will be asked to do something hard that will test how committed you are to this path. I am telling you now, whatever you are asked to do it. Do not hesitate. Do not show weakness. Because if you fail the test, both you and Catherine die. Yes, I know she is not really in Philadelphia. I know she is hiding somewhere, planning her own revenge. But I have people watching for her. The moment she surfaces, if you have not proven yourself, she will be found and killed. Do you understand?" Ezekiel was flooded with ice. Catherine was still alive, but she was in danger. And what he did tomorrow would decide if she lived or died. He said quietly, "I understand." Silas nodded and walked away without saying anything else. Ezekiel sat alone in the dark cabin, thinking about how hard it was for him to be there. He had to take part in something terrible tomorrow, had to show monsters that he was worthy. He had to either become part of the evil or find another way, a third choice that neither Silas nor the Brethren saw coming. He took out the paper with the names of his family and looked at them in the moonlight that came through the window. "Forgive me," he whispered, "for what I'm about to do, for what I have to become. I promise you, it won't be for nothing." The meeting started at midnight on June 3rd. 2 members of the Brethren took Ezekiel to the cellar where they took off his clothes and tied his hands behind his back. They took him down the stairs to the candlelit room where all 13 members were waiting in their robes. Silas was at the front of the altar. "Brothers of the harvest, tonight we conduct an initiation unlike any in our history. We bring into our circle a man who has every reason to hate us, a man who has lost everything because of what we represent. We do this to prove that our power extends even to our enemies. That anyone can be brought into the fold if the price is right," he gestured, and 2 more Brethren members brought forward a figure, bound and gagged, struggling weakly. They put the person on the altar and then stepped back. It was a young woman, maybe 18 or 19 years old, who was a slave and was very scared. Silas said, "This is your test, Ezekiel. You have to take the knife and make the first cut to join us. You have to show that your desire for revenge against Gaines is stronger than your moral objections to our methods. If you refuse, you die here tonight. If you accept, you become one of us, and we help you kill the man who killed your family." The other Brethren members started chanting in a language Ezekiel didn't understand. The candles flickered. There were shadows on the walls. Silas held out a knife with a long, sharp blade and a leather-wrapped handle. "Take it. Make a choice." Ezekiel stared at the woman on the altar. She was crying and trying to scream through the gag. She looked into his eyes, and in them he saw every slave who had ever been hurt by people like the Brethren. He saw Sarah, Ruth, and Benjamin. He saw his own face. He looked at the knife, at Silas, and at the 13 men who were watching to see what he would do. This was the moment when he would either turn into a monster or die trying to fight it. But there was a third choice that he had been planning for 3 weeks. It needed perfect timing and total dedication. He grabbed the knife. The members of the Brethren nodded in agreement. Silas smiled. The chanting got louder. Ezekiel walked up to the altar. The woman was terrified, and her eyes got big. He lifted the knife and then moved, but not toward the woman. Instead, he moved toward the nearest Brethren member. The knife glinted in the candlelight and stabbed the man in the throat before anyone could do anything. There was blood everywhere. The man fell down. Ezekiel grabbed the robe of the fallen member and ripped it off in one motion. He threw it over the closest candles, which made half of the room dark. Things went crazy. He moved through the chaos like a violent person. Years of anger turned into action. He grabbed another man and used him as a shield when someone swung at him. Threw the body at 2 more members, getting them all tangled up. Kicked out at the knee, hurt a bone break. Took a candle holder and hit someone in the face with it. The Brethren were strong men, but they didn't fight. They were soft, spoiled, and used to having other people do violence for them. Ezekiel was not any of those things. He fought his way to the altar where the woman was lying, grabbed her, and cut her bonds with the knife he had somehow kept. "Run!" he yelled up the stairs. "Run!" She jumped off the altar and ran away. Ezekiel turned back to the other Brethren members, 7 of whom were still standing and blocking the stairs. "You've made a terrible mistake," Silas said, his voice steady even though there was a lot of blood. "You killed both yourself and Catherine." "Maybe," Ezekiel said, "but I will take as many of you with me as I can." He didn't know that Catherine had come back to the main house above them. She had never been to Philadelphia. She had been hiding in the slave quarters, waiting, making plans, and getting support from other enslaved people in Cypress Grove. And when she heard the noise coming from the basement and saw the young woman come out of the kitchen screaming, she knew it was time. The time of reckoning. Catherine had been looking for people to hire for 3 weeks. She had moved from plantation to plantation in the dark, talking to enslaved people she had known her whole life, people who had watched her grow up and who had suffered under her father's ownership. She told them about the cellar, the rituals, and the Brethren, and she said that tonight was the night they could put an end to it. 23 people came, men and women who had nothing left to lose, who had lost children to the Brethren's rituals, who had seen friends disappear into the swamps, and who had lived through decades of violence from men who thought they were untouchable. They brought tools from the fields with them, like axes, scythes, and hammers. They came with anger that had been growing for generations. Catherine led them down when the young woman burst out of the cellar. The Brethren members who were still trying to subdue Ezekiel didn't hear them coming until it was too late. The people who were enslaved rushed into the cellar like a wave. What happened next showed no mercy and no doubt. These people had been told their whole lives that they were property, that their pain didn't matter, and that their lives had no value. They were now showing how wrong those ideas were. The Brethren tried to fight back. Judge Pelham pulled out a gun, but before he could shoot, he was shot. Reverend Crenshaw begged for mercy, but none was given. Marcus Fanning tried to run away up the stairs, but they pulled him back down. Silas Rutledge saw everything falling apart around him and made one last desperate move. He took Catherine and pulled her to him with a knife to her throat. "Stop, stop, or I'll kill her." The room went quiet. Catherine looked at her father without being scared. "Do it. Kill me. It changes nothing. You have already lost. I can still escape. I can still. You can still. Nothing." Catherine's voice was cold. "You spent 16 years trying to break me, make me forget, and convince me I was crazy. But you failed. I remembered everything. And I am going to watch you die." She suddenly and violently drove her elbow into his ribs. He let go of his grip. She turned around. Ezekiel was there before Silas could get better. The plantation owner and the enslaved man looked at each other. None of the power, privilege, or cruelty that Silas had had for years mattered now. "You took everything from me," Ezekiel said in a low voice. "You did it for no reason other than that you could, to prove something to men who valued cruelty over humanity." "Please," Silas said. Just that one word, sad and hopeless. "Please." Did my wife say please? Did my son? Did any of the people you killed in this cellar? Ezekiel shook his head. "No mercy. Not for you. Not ever." What happened next was terrible and final. The enslaved people made sure that none of the brethren lived. In their last moments, 13 men who thought they were above consequence learned that power was an illusion, that cruelty always came back to haunt them. Catherine stood in the middle of the cellar when it was over, surrounded by bodies. She was shaking, but not because she was scared. She was free. Finally, 16 years of anger let out. Ezekiel went to her. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Are you?" "Just a few cuts. Nothing serious." He looked around at the damage. "What do we do now?" "Now?" Catherine said with a sad smile. "Now we burn it all. The cellar, the ledger, the evidence. We destroy every trace of what happened here. But that evidence could prove what they did, could bring justice." "Justice?" Catherine laughed bitterly. Ezekiel looked at everything. "This is justice, the only kind we were ever going to get. If we try to take that ledger to the police, what happens? We are hunted down and killed. The surviving Brethren members in other counties come for us. This only ends if everyone believes the Cypress Grove chapter died in an accident. If there is no evidence, no witnesses, no story to tell." She was right, and Ezekiel knew it. Then we set it on fire. They got ready for the next 2 hours. The slaves who had helped them left before dawn and went back to their different plantations. They wouldn't say anything. They hadn't seen anything. They didn't know anything. That's how people stayed alive. Catherine and Ezekiel poured oil all over the cellar, stacked wood and kindling, and put the bodies in positions that might look like an accident if someone looked into it. They then put the ledger and all the journals in the middle of the altar. "Hold on," Ezekiel said. He opened the ledger one last time and saw the notes about his family. He carefully ripped out those pages, folded them, and put them in his shirt, for them, so they don't forget. Catherine nodded. Then she lit a candle and held it up to the wood that was soaked in oil. The fire started right away. The cellar was on fire in a matter of minutes. They ran up the stairs and out of the house. They stood in the yard and watched as the flames consumed Cypress Grove Plantation. People would show up. The smoke would be seen by other plantations. There would be questions, but Catherine and Ezekiel had their story ready. A horrible accident. A candle fell over in the basement. The master and his guests were stuck below. So sad and awful. No one would ever know what really happened. Catherine turned to Ezekiel as the sun rose over the burning ruins. "What are you going to do now?" "Go north. Use the chaos of this fire to disappear. Maybe find others who want to fight, and make a network that can help people escape." He took out the paper with the names of his family. "I can't bring them back, but I can make sure that others don't have to go through the same thing. I'm going north too. I'll use the money I've been stealing from my father's accounts for years. I'll start over." She stopped. "But I won't forget. I'll write down everything that happened here, so that someday, somehow, someone will know the truth. They sealed the records. If you try to make your testimony public, they will seal it too. Then I'll hide it. I'll code it. I'll leave it somewhere to be found decades from now, when we're all dead and it can't hurt us anymore. She looked at the house that was on fire. The truth always comes out in the end, even when people try to hide it. They stayed until the fire went out and Cypress Grove Plantation was nothing but ash and blackened wood. There was nothing left to show that 13 men had gathered there to do terrible things. After that, they went their separate ways. Catherine went north to Charleston and then to Philadelphia, while Ezekiel went west to the frontier, where enslaved people could hide in communities that didn't ask questions. They never saw each other again. The official story was exactly what they wanted: a sad accident. When a fire broke out, Silas Rutledge and 12 other important men were meeting at Cypress Grove to talk business. All 13 died in the basement, where they were trapped by smoke before they could get out. A terrible loss for Colleton County. Funerals with full honors. Eulogies praising what they did for society. People said that Catherine Rutledge also died in the fire. Her father's crazy daughter was stuck in her room and couldn't get out. This is a very sad footnote to an already sad event. No one asked any questions. No one looked very closely. The people who were enslaved and took part didn't say anything. They hadn't seen anything. They didn't know anything. That's how people stayed alive. Most of them were sold to different plantations within a few months, and Cypress Grove was closed down. They spread out across South Carolina and beyond, taking their secret with them to the grave. Years went by. Eventually, the ruins of Cypress Grove were torn down. The land was sold. New buildings have been built. Life went on, as it always does, covering up the past with the present. But the whispers kept coming. People in slave quarters told stories late at night about the plantation where the masters burned, about the night that justice caught up with men who thought they were above the law, about the man and woman who made it happen. The stories changed each time they were told, turning into legends and then myths. But the main idea stayed the same. Being cruel had consequences. That power wasn't all there was. That the weak sometimes found their strength. Union troops took over the area where Cypress Grove used to be during the Civil War in 1863. They found bones in the swamp nearby, markings on trees that looked like places where rituals took place, and signs of old tunnels under the property. But the war went on, and no one had time to look into it more. A journal was found sealed in a wall during demolition work in 1971. It had everything in it: names, dates, rituals, and victims. But it was coded, just like Catherine said it would be. And before anyone could figure it out completely, the journal disappeared from the county records. Some people say it was ruined. Some people say that descendants of the Brethren families took it to keep their ancestors' secrets safe. Some people think it still exists somewhere and will be found again when the time is right. What we do know is that in 1841, 13 famous men died in a fire. Catherine Rutledge went missing soon after, but no one ever found her body. There are no records of the sale of Ezekiel Cross, an enslaved man, to a plantation in Alabama. And for years after that, stories spread among enslaved communities about a group that helped people escape, led by a man who had fought the monster and won. No one can say for sure if those stories were true or just wishful thinking. But sometimes the truth isn't in official records. It's in the stories people tell, the memories they keep, and the justice they remember, even when history tries to forget. This mystery shows us that power based on cruelty is never as strong as it seems, that secrets hidden in the dark will come to light. The people who are thought to be weak often have the most dangerous power of all: the power to remember, the power to witness, and the power to refuse to forget. What do you think about this story? Do you think everything was made clear? Do you think that journal is still out there, waiting to be found? If you like this story and want to read more dark historical mysteries like it, sign up for Liturgy of Fear. Hit the bell to get notifications so you never miss a story. Also, share this video with someone who likes mysteries that mix history and horror. We need to remember these stories. People need to hear these voices. I'll see you in the next video.